put it on the screen? Because they don't have it, do they?
We want to talk with Brian, first?
Well, we're going to call the meeting to order first and make sure that the camera crew is ready to roll. We're good? All right.
Thumbs up.
We're good to go?
It's around 7 o'clock, maybe a few minutes after, on June 19th. This is a meeting of the Norfolk Board of Health. We are now in order. So, why don't we begin with our representative from Republic, who is here with us tonight to explain what's been going on in our town
Absolutely.
when it comes to trash pickup.
I'll just give a little explanation who I am. My name is Brian Penny. I'm the operations manager for the Fall River Division. The Fall River Division, what we handle out here in Norfolk is all the commercial and industrial stops. The Auburn Division is what they handle all the residential stops. Unfortunately, Joe Alves is out of town, so he couldn't be here today. But if the board is okay with it, I'd like to kind of explain essentially what led up to the failure and what we're doing to rectify it going forward. Over the last, I've been in this business since 1987. Over the last essentially 5 years, there's been a deterioration in the number of CDL drivers and mechanics that are available. So staffing's become tougher and tougher and tougher. And the Auburn Division was beginning to struggle early on this year. It was starting to not quite reach a critical level, but it was starting to get there. And essentially what happened is we lost a manager, a couple supervisors, and a number of drivers, as well as a maintenance manager and some techs. So as you can imagine, when you're already at difficult staffing levels, we had reached that critical point. And that's when what you've seen, essentially it was a confluence of events. Trucks started to break down, trucks weren't getting fixed, didn't have enough drivers to cover them. So what we typically do as a company when we get to a point where we're struggling is we bring in what's called SOS help, and that's pooling resources from all over the country. And what we had now, it takes time to mobilize that, and what you saw over the last essentially 4 to 5 weeks was trying to get enough guys in. So for every route you're down, you need at least 2 SOS drivers. For every truck you're down, essentially you need 2 techs. So because with the drivers, the regular driver knows the route, he can get the route done in under 12 hours per DOT regulations. So you need 2 guys to actually do it because they're unfamiliar with the area. The mobilization simply just didn't happen fast enough. On top of that, we have gone from a local customer service model to a regional customer service model. So our 800 numbers don't flow into the different divisions around Mass, they flow into one center. And there's been some communication breakdown in between, so a lot of time the information isn't getting back, and there's mistakes made, divisions it was sent to, wrong divisions. So we couldn't cover the work, weren't getting the information fast enough, weren't able to communicate effectively, and essentially that's what you saw. Weeks where we literally could not get stops off the ground out of the Auburn Division. Where we are now is we essentially have a lot of techs out there working on the trucks. Out of 60 trucks out of that fleet, we had days where it was 25 to 26 down. So as you can imagine, you can't get the work done. Now they're starting to turn the corner. I've sent trucks out of my division, I've sent techs out of my division. We're trying to send drivers, but we ourselves are at a point where we struggle with staffing. So all the local divisions, the Boston Market, Tingsboro, Fall River, which covers Rhode Island, and the whole South Coast, Marshfield, and the Cape, we were all sending techs in the drivers we could spare. It just wasn't enough and didn't happen fast enough. That's why you saw a period of time just go by and by, and we weren't rectifying the problem. I think now we're starting to get a handle on it. I don't want to sit here and say the problem's solved, but we're starting to. We continually pile in resources every week. We're rolling in new SOS drivers, new SOS techs, and rolling out the ones that are currently here. The overarching plan, the long-term plan, is to speed up our hiring process, because our hiring process, we probably have one of the most extensive background check processes and training processes. It isn't like it used to be. When I was 18, the way I learned how to drive a rubbish truck was they handed me the keys, handed me the route sheet, handed me the map book, and gave me the pat on the back and said, go out there and do the best you can. 17 hours later, you roll in the yard, and we'll see you tomorrow. We don't do that anymore. It varies from driver to driver depending on skill set when we receive the driver. I've had drivers that are ready to roll on their own and get trained on a route, and as quickly as 8 weeks. I've had drivers where it's taken 4 months. The drivers that have taken 4 months, I'm proud to say, those seem to be the drivers that we don't run into incidents and accidents and issues and problems. the drivers that sometimes, if you let a driver out too soon, you're opening yourself up for more issues. So we didn't want to give up on our training process, but Auburn is now staffing to the levels they need. But again, it takes time to release these drivers out as regular route drivers. A driver decides he wants to leave, he's gone in a week or two. Like I said, if you're replacing him, it takes 4 months to get a driver up to standard. That model is very difficult to keep up with. And based on what transpired and how fast all that happened, it just was impossible for us to get everything done and recover from some of the issues. Like I said, I think we're getting there now. We're not completely there, but we do have an overarching plan to continue to bring in drivers. I believe they have another 6 or 7 drivers in the queue on the residential side of the house, as well as they have some that just came out of training. We are committed to making sure that we keep the resources here so that we don't have a repeat of what went on. Like I said, confluence of events, in my opinion, perfect storm. The CRC model, like I said, we struggled with it, going from a regional from a local to a regional customer service process. That really, it was problematic. I was hearing of stories of long hold times. Oh, we'll get it picked up, and then that never get communicated back to division level. I know the senior manager from the CRC is now directly involved in trying to rectify that. It's only 2 years old. As you know, you're going to work bugs out of any new system you plug in.
So where do we stand in terms of trash still sitting on the streets?
It's my understanding that everything that's been sitting has been picked up, that we are almost completely back on the regular schedules, again, with the SOS drivers that are in. When I spoke with Joe and spoke with my area ops manager, Jeff D'Angelo, he said we were looking pretty good. And again, we're still continuing to plug in more resources. I don't anticipate us having to deal with this again, but I don't want to make a promise I can't keep. At this point, like I said, I think we're there, and we're going to keep the resources there as long as it needs to be.
So, Brian?
Yeah.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
I have a question. What type of a contract do people sign with you for your services? What does the contract say?
Typical, it's called the CSA, the Customer Service Agreement, and the contract is to provide services depending on what level of service they purchase, whether it be weekly, bi-weekly, monthly. It's all dependent on the customer.
Okay.
If we feel the customer has the option to get out of the contract.
So do you ask them for some type of number, email or something that you can communicate to them that, oh, we can't pick you up this week? It sounds to us like people just had no idea what was going on. So you talked about communication.
Yep.
Maybe the communication was flowing in one direction to you, but it didn't sound like it was flowing in another direction to the customer. So, and I didn't hear that in your plan of correction.
Correct. Part of it was as well, like I said, we lost managers and supervisors. So now you're plugging in new managers and new supervisors and trying to figure out where's our current deficiencies, where's the most critical need, and addressing the most critical needs first, and working backwards to, all right, we're on a day delay versus, wait a second, we have a whole section of town that hasn't been picked up in 3 weeks. So part of the communication breakdown, as I said, was you weren't calling directly into the division. You call into the customer service center, and then they were relaying the message back to the division. And there were failures in that aspect of it. I feel like it's starting to get worked out and fixed, but what's supposed to happen and what will be happening going forward, the way I run in my division, and they're supposed to do the same thing across the board, but again, not having a manager head left and supervisors, essentially plugging in new guys that didn't have the understanding. We do what's called compass announcements, so I go into Compass and I plug in, for instance, if I have a route that is going to be down because we're short-staffed, that goes into a Compass announcement. So when they plug in, your customer service rep types in Norfolk, route whatever is on a day delay, and we also do what's called a call-em-all. So any customer that's within the system would get a call-em-all at that point, and that call-em-all would say, your route is on a day delay or on a 2-day delay, or an explanation as to what's taking place. Like I said, that didn't happen just because of the pace at which we had turnover in there. Now, that should be taking place on a regular basis. The communication should be a two-way communication, not just them calling in and saying, I'm not getting my trash and recycling picked up. It should be communication coming back from the division level stating, we're gonna be out there on Wednesday. We're gonna be out there on Thursday. That should be taking place. If that's not, we need to know about it. But I'm pretty confident that that is taking place, because that is the process. All our divisions are required to do that. If you are gonna delay a route in any way, you are to do a compass announcements as well as do a call them all to all the existing customers within that route.
So Brian, and thanks again for coming in. I think that was the big issue, was that, you know, it doesn't elevate to our level of a public health concern until trash is building up. You know,
Right.
we've all had issues with services, companies being late for one reason or the other, and it's worked out between the client and the company. And I think the fact that it got elevated to us was just because of that. There was no communication. No one knew what was going on. But so I think that was the big issue, the communication. It sounds like you got it fixed.
I think, like I said, I think we're getting better. I will tell you, like I said, we service, my division services the commercial and the roll-off stops within the town. And there were homeowners coming up to my commercial drivers and saying, you didn't pick up my trash. So they're calling in the supervisor, who's then calling into me. I'm then calling into the division in Auburn and saying, can you please look into this address? And there were cases where it wasn't in the system. So somewhere along the line between the CRC and the division, it didn't get kicked back to the division. And like I said, that's the model where we used to do it locally, and a lot of that stuff was in-house. If my division serviced your home and you had a problem, you picked up the phone and you called the division, you got one of my customer service reps, and then they call down to operations and say, I have Jeff on the phone from this address in Norfolk, and he's saying his trash wasn't picked up. And it just happens a lot faster.
Right. Understood.
Like I said, this model, it's a national model they've used, and they're still working out the bugs.
And Betsy, how are we still getting complaints? Or-
I haven't received any, no.
Okay, so I mean, kind of the proof is in the pudding as far as that goes, so.
And we are committed, like I said, I've sat with our area operations manager who runs the whole Northeast, as well as our area vice president, and they are committed. I know our area vice president was out in Halston, I believe, last night. We are gonna continue to plug resources in, whatever we need. We pull what we can locally without causing similar problems in our local divisions, but the majority of what's coming in is drivers from all over the country. And they flow them out. They try to do like a week to 2 weeks, and then flow new guys in, pull them back out, and then flow them back out again. I wanna say before we're, realistically, where it's the division standing on its own without the resources from the national level, it's probably looking at like September. But the resources will stay throughout the entire summer until Auburn is on their feet.
And I think in that regard, as long as you're dealing it with your customers, and we're not hearing about it, then it's just, you know, again, it's between a service company
Yep.
and their customer, and you guys are working it out, and that's what's important to us, so.
Yeah, like I said, I feel like we've got a hold of it. I think there's enough resources in place. Like I said, I know by the time we're all said and done, we'll get Auburn back on its feet where it needs to be.
Anything else? Do you have any Republic customers in here? No. All right. Well, I'll add my thanks as well for you
Yep.
to you for coming by to explain what happened. I only got one phone call at my house, but I think Betsy got a few more than that. So people were obviously very upset.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think, as already indicated, the major source was not only the fact the trash was still sitting there weeks later, but no indication of, you know, when.
What's the plan?
Or assurances being delivered over the phone, which then didn't actually ever happen.
Yep.
So if we've turned the corner on that, which is what I'm hearing,
Yep.
then let's just keep rolling it out.
I will say, and Betsy could tell you, because the permit's in our division, it's out of Fall River, like I said, because we do the commercial industrial. So she reached out to us. When she reached out to us, I reached out to Auburn and said, you know, what's the game plan? What do you need? I actually had another company come out and help us out as well around Memorial Weekend, just to get some of the stuff off the ground, because I knew they were struggling out there. And Joe's a great guy, division manager out there, super guy, been with us 10 years. He knows what he's doing. He'll get that division under control. and they're gonna give him the resources he needs to get back on our feet. But you have my number, I'll leave you my card too. You guys ever have a problem, don't hesitate, reach out to me. I'll get it rectified.
Right.
Fair enough?
All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Brian,
Coming in.
Oh, anytime.
thank you.
Mr. Kane, good evening.
Thanks again.
Um,
Seeing you.
Everybody have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have a document here from your attorney. And a grant of Title V on nitrogen loading restriction and easement. Did you have a chance to take a look at it?
This one here.
I'd like to, let's turn to Wade then, since
Yeah, let me
Wade, I
take that.
imagine, has.
Yes, I have. I think there's only one, yep, March 21st. It's in there. All right. It's good. You'll see on page 3, on the top of the page, there's a space for land dated.
Yeah,
Okay, that just has to be filled in
okay.
with the plan that's on the screen.
Yeah, Betsy, can I ask, I didn't get a copy of this plan yet. Is the date on that, is it June?
Let me just enlarge it a little bit.
I can see it down there on the.
Yeah, it's June 13th, 2018.
13.
Yeah. Scale of 1 to 60.
So the document contains essentially a list of, these are the things that aren't going to happen on this site to maintain the low nitrogen loadings. Are you comfortable with that list, Wade?
I'm sorry, I'm just noticing something. I got revised. This has the crossouts
Well,
inside.
we had
Yeah,
two
this
versions,
is-
one
I gave
with,
you- This is just the red line version.
Okay, okay,
I have a cleaned up version.
okay, I was just wondering, so I got the wrong version. I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
the question is, the list of thou shall nots in here, the prohibitions. It's on page 3.
Yes.
It seemed like a pretty comprehensive list to me, but are you also comfortable that this is inclusive enough to keep any unwarranted nitrogen from entering the soil?
Yes, those, the obligations and the easement, that's what the state requires, yes, it looks
All right.
good.
How about you,
The only
Jeff?
thing I did, and I'm just glancing over this now, the only thing I'd say, and I'd say this again at the meeting, I know this goes back because we've already crossed this bridge, but part of our allowance on issuing this is that we can apply any standard we see fit to protect the resources of the town, and that's why we picked the downstream areas. And that doesn't matter to us what DEP of Worcester says about what we can and can't do for a definition. We picked it to protect our groundwater. So I'm not really concerned about what the letter says. I totally disagree with most of the body of it, but that said, we're on to approving the preservation part.
Oh, But I do have something from the state.
Mhm.
I did contact the state
Mhm.
because of the concern that was brought up in the last meeting, and I did get a speak to Dave for you, which I mentioned in my letter. And I did something in my May 3rd letter and asked them, could you review this so I won't be in any doubt?
Good.
And he emailed me back, it looks good to me,
That's perfect.
so.
Yeah, as far as them telling us what we can and can't do, to me, that's hogwash. But I'm glad that you did actually review it and come up with that.
Oh, yeah, the whole thing was re-examined, and if you go on the top of the page, Betsy, if you could move that screen to the top.
Got it.
Because actually, DEP Worcester is actually wrong in that regard.
And this
Is
is,
that
I
big
deleted
enough?
that.
yeah, that's great.
It doesn't go to DEP anymore.
So this part right here.
Could you grab a microphone, please?
Oh, sure.
All right, go.
I really wish, engineer was here. Okay, so if you see the lots 1 to 14, and you see the areas that they actually have as they were created as individual lots. And over here, you see the easement area, which is open space 1, with the area space that's needed to make lot 1 into a 40,000 square foot lot. So the land is there, the aggregate land. And so you can see from lots 1 to 7 and 10 to 14, you have 2,780,221 square feet from those lots together on their own. So they're all as you can see, Lot 1 could actually be a 3-bedroom house. Lot 4 could be a 2-bedroom house. So they need additional land for the 40,000 square foot lot for a 4-bedroom house because we're in the water recharge area. And that's where Open Space 1 comes into place. And Open Space 1 has, cumulatively, has all this land available. Actually has more. And the easement area doesn't include the pond, it doesn't include the wetlands because it's not allowed. So you do have land available for these lots for them to expand their septic design to 4 bedrooms because the subdivision itself, through the help of the open space and through this nitrogen aggregate easement, allows enough land absorption for a 4-bedroom house.
But that's just nitrogen aggregate area, not downstream sensitive receptors, correct?
Well, the downstream is satisfied.
Property line,
Is
but not,
satisfied.
not per, we talked about this before, though. We went into this before, so I'm not gonna redo it, but it's not the actual mass loading that we're talking about there. It's nitrogen credit land based over square footage.
Correct, yeah, it's credit link, because the balance, the calculation doesn't apply to this particular subdivision where back on, I think it was Pond Street where we had the medical building, we had one individual.
Again, I don't wanna get into this again, but we are allowed to choose what we want to do to protect our resources, and we decided to pick a downstream nitrogen-sensitive area to review it per.
But again, we can go again, it's like apples and oranges. It doesn't apply to this subdivision because you can't apply it.
You can apply it, it just doesn't go by, if you look at what they call for by a facility definition by DEP, it might not fit the actual bill, but we asked for it to be looked at, so.
Correct, and it doesn't fit, there's no way of doing it, the calculation, because you have
Of course there's a
14.
way to do it, wait.
Well, you have 14 individual systems under 2,000 gallons per day, so you don't have a grounding part, it's not mounded, so there's no mound calculations. You can try fit into the calculations, their samples, but it doesn't fit. It doesn't apply to this.
Again, we're not gonna, I don't wanna start redoing this, we went through this last time. I mean, I disagreed with that
Perplexed.
before, I still disagree with that now. But anyway, moving forward.
Okay.
Well, the issue is that the land in aggregate is not going to have an impact on nitrogen loading. The issue of, where within all of that flow to an off-site location could have some influence, is I think the point that Jeff is making.
Well, let's put it into another project. Let's say that this wasn't a aggregate nitrogen aggregate loading subdivision. Say that Mr. Kane decided to take the land and just make 40,000 square foot lots and 30,000 square foot lots. And he could legally submit septic designs with the same number of bedrooms, but just eliminate the open space and just make the lots bigger, and that no one would say anything.
Absolutely, but he didn't.
Well, I'm saying because the land absorption is there, and the way the state looks at protection of public water is if you have a 10,000 square foot per bedroom on a water recharge area, you're fine. But they say, but if you have a discharge point of over 2,000 gallons per day, which is actually, it's a point, a discharge point, which would now, it may affect the down gradient because now it's a concentrated flow. It's almost like a road drainage going into a pond with salt from the road. It's a concentrated amount going to one area, and that could affect the environment. But if it's spread out all, over acres and acres of land, you don't have that effect. You have a point charge.
Yeah,
Wait,
I
but you
understand
are,
what you're
you are
saying, Wade.
simplifying it. There's a lot of variables that go into it, and you could run into the situation where you have a bedroom, a house design that's 10,000 square feet per bedroom. With the right soil conditions and different type of variables met, you could be causing an issue downstream, but never be looked at.
There's a possibility, but
Right.
the regulation, that your local regulation doesn't address that.
But the state regulation tells us we can apply anything we really want when issuing this nitrogen credit land. And again, what we talked about before is us protecting the groundwater in the town. That's what we wanted done. And I don't care what DEP says, I don't care what Worcester says, I've said them being wrong before. We were trying to protect our town resources.
Yeah.
And you can look at it that way. You can put any number you want into those variables, be it 10,000 or 1,500, and you're gonna come up with an answer, so.
All right, so we have a restriction in front of us. Yeah, this is still a marked up copy, but you can sort of figure out what the final one looks like. There's- is there a motion to take action on this document?
If there is no further discussion, and if everyone agrees upon what we have in front of us, I make a motion that we grant Title V nitrogen loading restriction easement for Norway. Norway Farms.
Is there a second?
Reverting to our previous conversation before, when we were told we're all set, I will second that motion.
Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Say aye. Aye. We're there.
Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you for your patience.
You know what? I will have the board sign it, I'll notarize it if you wanna come into the office tomorrow.
Yep.
And I will notarize your signature.
I'll be right in.
Give me time, give me a couple minutes in the morning.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, folks.
Good night.
11-ish, sound good? Anytime's fine, yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
All right.
Again,
Good evening.
Okay. Good luck with the project.
Thank you very much.
Next on our list. Looks like minutes
Minutes,
from way back. Let's see, through 20.
May 3rd. Oh, March 27th. March 27th.
Let's consider the minutes of the meeting back on March 27th. Are there any suggestions for changes?
I don't, I'm all set.
No, wait.
Okay,
Motion to
Motion to
accept the March 27, 2018 meeting minutes as presented.
Second,
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, March 27th is good. Let's move on to May the 3rd. Any changes?
No.
I think what's stated here is what we decided.
Motion to accept the May 3rd, 2018 meeting minutes as presented.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So May 3 is done. So next, correspondence review.
So, just a few things. There was another audit. I'm not quite sure how often they do audits of MCI, but there was another audit. I brought this up once before. It seems like there are always lots of violations, and there were 46 repeat violations. And I think we talked about this. It's just a courtesy that they send this to us, but these were repeat violations in the kitchen.
Yeah, what sort of,
I mean,
For
they,
MCI Norfolk.
to me, it looks like, why didn't they just fix them? The ammonium solution was lower than the manufacturer's recommended concentrations. I mean, why don't they fix some of these things? Why would they want to keep having 46 repeat violations? I don't know. I just want you to know, as I'm the one that's reviewing these, that we do receive this correspondence. And these are citizens of our town. I don't think that's its own little
they
fiefdom
probably
over
don't
there.
vote, but they are citizens.
Yeah.
Or the residents.
Residents.
certainly. Involuntary as it may be. So your recollection is that listed?
Well, if
They're
the
talking
asterisk is, if you look on the violations, wherever there's an asterisk,
That's a
those are
repeat.
repeat violations. And it says where I highlighted 46 repeat. You know, there are a lot, I mean, they look at a lot of things, but cell size, maybe they can't change that. That was one of the violations, square feet or something like that of cell size. But, you know, curtains, shades being torn, and a lot of things that, why don't they just fix them and make this a presentable
Looks like
place?
I mean, looks like a fairly comprehensive review.
Right.
I mean, I guess, I don't know, I mean, I see what you're talking about with the repeat ones. Some of it, I just imagine would be hard to catch everything, but what's what you're kind of proposing to do?
I
about it?
don't know, I'm just saying, if they're gonna send them to us,
I mean, I put it
we're
this way,
supposed to
looking at this right
review
here,
them.
I
Well, we
wouldn't,
can
I-
send a
I
note
bother.
back if there is a concern that some of these things, I mean, you know, curtains that are disarray are one thing, but if there's actually something that deals with public health on here,
Okay, I can look at it.
oh, there definitely are some, I mean, you can see that, but I
in
mean,
the
what,
kitchen.
some of them you're
sure,
talking about, you
certain.
know, is the protruding straw from the milk is a little over a half-inch long, I mean, so there's looking at some of these things with a fine-tooth comb.
Yeah,
Do
Yeah.
what you will with it.
who does the inspection?
it's the state, it's a state.
Well, it says DPH, but
Community
Oh,
sanitation, program.
Yeah, the state overviews their own property. The local
Right.
doesn't have anything to do with the state.
sure. Is this person who's doing this work for DPH or for whom?
I'm not sure.
It says it,
Department of Public Health,
Yeah.
it's the community
Like,
sanitation.
there's a couple that are more serious. I mean, you can see here, food storage, no functioning thermometer in the refrigerator. I can see that being more
Mhm.
significant than, you know, the
Mhm.
straw sticking out of the milk being slightly over a half-inch long.
and our food service
Is that a,
agent would,
uh,
you know, wouldn't be happy with that.
Is that one a repeat? At least
How-
that one wasn't a
how
repeat,
is
so
it-
that's good.
How is the straw being in violation of a health code?
No, I think, I don't know. Maybe it gets too far down, it gets too warm at the tip and gets bacteria grow? I don't know. That's just a guess.
Well, let's see what next month brings.
All right, if their record is as bad next month as it was this one, maybe a note
Okay,
to the DPH would be in order here.
yeah.
Yeah, look, some of those, like I said, that thermometer one I could see being an issue. If that one pops up repeatedly, right? I mean, that's something you should have.
Jurisdiction over the state, though, how can we?
Well,
Well, we don't.
caulking moldy in
We can
the
make a-
shower, you know, shower 3 and 6 and 1 and 2.
Bigger fish to fry here, but.
Yeah.
Keep track of it, until you send them a letter.
I've had Airbnbs with that problem too. so,
Okay,
Situation that's like-
All right,
all right, so that was just.
Let's send Wade in.
Well, what, I think we were just on the board and.
so what else do we have for correspondence?
No, I don't wanna go- Okay, so, there's a retraction of the permanent, Mabit letter to the board, that there's a retraction of the permanent solution for the former Buckley Man site location. So this is dated May 15th, and now there was a zoning board hearing on June 6th, and this is not new information anymore.
Mhm.
But I just wanted you to know that happened too. And
Well, they're doing
Yeah.
that, what do they call that, at the library, that's, where you put all the information out,
public information plan, or
Something like a PIP,
public,
is it?
yeah, PIP. So
Oh.
there should be a hearing
It's in July, isn't it, late July?
to tell the whole community what that will be all about.
So that you
Mabit,
can get input from the community to what they wanna look at.
right, but they're gonna, Mabit is gonna explain how that whole process will go.
And where, does anyone know where we are with the town as far as choosing a consultant for?
It's all done. And the report is here.
The town, this is the one for the town?
Yeah, there was a zoning board report done by
That was quick.
Weston and Sampson, and this was presented on June 6th.
Yeah, I think it's
And this
kind of a
was-
preliminary look at what they're gonna be doing.
Right, so this was Buckley Mann went back and gave a history of what happened. This is a YouTube, you can see it on YouTube. It's really very
Did our
interesting.
concerns get put into that proposal?
Which concerns were
When
those?
we had that meeting, we talked about some, I remember, I forget what the specifics were that we discussed at that meeting, but we said we should make these known that we wanted to get these in the proposal.
Well, I
Remember that?
actually
Might be too late.
sent a letter, an email to Betsy, and I was asking that you folks review, if I can find the piece of paper.
That was,
Just give me a second. Specifically, I thought we would have it in our packet tonight, but I'm not seeing it.
I mean, so that was on, that, we talked about this on our May 3rd meeting, correct?
Yeah,
And at that point, they hadn't picked a consultant yet. Is that correct?
well, the consultant is
These guys.
Weston.
Right, I know, but at the time, I don't think they'd even picked one.
No, they hadn't. They had not
So-
I
picked
think
one.
proposals had been submitted by that time, but they hadn't actually made their decision as to who was gonna do
They've
the
already,
work.
they've already completed the review of this?
No, this is a preliminary
Oh, okay.
report. It's kind of like a status report of where they are in terms of going through the pile of information that's out there. I mean, these folks are trying to essentially define where there are some data gaps and to map out a strategy for additional sampling and analysis to fill in those gaps.
Did the Board of Health get copied on this? This is the first I've seen it and heard of it. I mean, why are we out of the loop
Well-
on this?
Well, first of all, the zoning board is the one that's in charge of this whole operation.
Oh, yeah, but
There
they
is,
should
there
be-
is a periodic gathering of the heads of the different boards, including me, to look at what's coming in. I didn't go to the zoning board meeting. There was a meeting before that, on something like the 2nd of June, downstairs, where this fellow attended, and where the whole point of what they were trying to do was discussed. And that's what I'm conveying right now. But what the goal of all this is to figure out, based on all the data that's out there, are there still places where we feel there should be some additional testing, additional samples taken? I mean, the basic problem is you have a few places on this site where there are some high concentrations of heavy metals and organics. And the question is any of that stuff likely to have any impact on groundwater? That's really what we're talking about here, in terms of the public health
And it's
issues.
good that you know about this. I'm just surprised, even, I know the zoning board is the lead on this. But anything that reports that come in should be disseminated to us as well, because we're the stewards of the groundwaters too. So I think
Sure.
it'd be nice if we get copies of these reports,
Well-
because this is the first I've seen it.
Well, and this isn't even,
Well,
this
the
isn't a
thing you-
report.
That was the
This is-
presentation
this is a
that
bunch
they,
of
that was the
slides
presentation that they
saying-
gave at the meeting, and this was the report that Buckley gave at the meeting. That's why I was wondering if either one of yous had gone to that meeting. And I wish I could find that email.
The owner.
well, these are the
report.
data that were in the original report.
Who gave that
Do you know
report?
the email I'm talking
is the
about?
Maybach?
One I sent you?
Maybe that's
The-
from
the thick
Yeah,
one,
like
the
a
real
minute
thick one?
ago,
That's
and now
from
I
the
can't
developer,
find it.
Yeah, there's been other work
That
done.
I was in relation to,
Yeah, we've seen all this data before.
Yeah. Betsy, could you just make sure that the zoning board, we get that stuff disseminated to us as well, whatever comes in as far as that goes?
Anything comes in to me, I distribute it to you guys,
Alright.
so.
so there were I sent a letter to Betsy saying there were high concentrations of chromium, arsenic, antimony, and there were the Massachusetts MCP, yes,
Contingency.
I'm sorry,
Plan.
plan, says someone has to report these to DEP. But no one's reporting anything to DEP. All of these reports are coming out telling us that there are high levels of this stuff, but no one's reporting it as far as I know, from the town.
Well, what is
My
that?
question was, whose responsibility is it to report this stuff? I mean, they talk about lead levels in the Buckley report from years gone by, as well as most recently, and who's supposed to report it? Do we report these things, or?
Well, this reporting business sometimes gets a little confusing because reportable concentrations or reportable incidences of things showing up are generally related to there has been an accident. There has been a release of toxic materials which nobody knew about. And so if some data point out there says, uh-oh, we have a problem now because this event has now taken place, that's a reportable concentration that has to be known to the folks at the state. The contamination we're talking about here is decades old. So this is not news to anybody. What we're doing now is trying to get a better handle on what exactly that site poses as a possible health hazard. That's really what we're talking about now.
Well, I'm not sure I agree with that 100%. No one has ever reported it to the state. You know, there's no
Well,
documentation.
this goes back to the 1990s, 1980s.
Well,
This is old
I mean,
news.
Most recently, it was 2018 that.
And some additional data has been.
Berkeley Min has done additional testing.
Right, right.
And they're giving us these numbers,
Mhm.
and who's reporting these numbers? Is anyone reporting any of this stuff to the state? So, is it gonna do any good at this point? There's a lot of work going on right now.
Hmm.
And maybe there, I'm not sure if it will do any good at this point until they, but I think what's important is that there's a lot more work going on, that it was just sitting there for a long time and no one was.
Our consultant should come back with a report, not just this, an
No,
actual
no,
report.
this is a
with-
presentation.
Right, with conclusions
Mhm.
of what to do, and the idea is that they have our interests in mind when they're doing this. If there's items that need to be further reported, or new items that have come up, I would imagine that would be in the conclusions, but that's something to keep an eye out for when the report actually is generated.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, the one issue is we do have high concentrations in a few spots of trace metals and some organics. The question that I think everybody is concerned about, at least I certainly am, is, all right, the stuff is in the soil, it's been there for decades. Is any of it leaching out of the soil and getting into the groundwater? And there only have been a few analyses of groundwater, which generally have come up clean. I'm kind of worried that there haven't been a lot of those samples taken right where we see the hot spots in terms of the soil contamination. So we had this discussion back before the ZBA meeting. The one thing I pointed out is I would really like to make sure that if we have a known location where there is a lot of, like the data you're looking at, soil contamination, we need to be sure that none of that material, if this is the case, is making its way into groundwater. Because that's the number one thing that I believe as a Board of Health is the biggest public health issue for us.
Well, this, the Weston Sampson presentation, that was one of the biggest points, that they've only done a limited amount of testing, even over all the years. And they've never even touched the carbonizer lagoon.
Well, yeah, there are some
So,
data points nearby, but
You know,
Not in the
no,
middle,
but
not in the middle.
nothing, I mean, you can look at this is really interesting stuff if you want to listen to the presentation, and, you know, can print it out. So a lot more work has to be done, and I think that that's, thanks to the community that brought this to the attention of all of the boards in town, that only a limited amount of testing has been done at that site, so.
yeah, well, some would argue there's been a substantial amount, but maybe
Yeah.
not evenly distributed in such a way that you can be confident they've got all the likely sources covered. The Carbonizer Lagoon, frankly, on my list is probably the highest up on the list. 'Cause the other
That's the one where they
lagoons-
buried the stuff, correct?
No, no.
Well, there are a series of lagoons there, some of which have been
Yeah.
very extensively characterized, and for whatever reason, years ago, they kind of lost focus on the one you're talking about now. And it may well be the one that contains the most interesting material that needs to really be looked at carefully to make sure there's no groundwater contamination.
And the carbonizer trench, they've never anyway,
Yeah.
In
there's a
this
lot more
summary-
work needs to be
In
done.
the summary that Weston Sampson has done, are they
This-
leaning toward, have they mentioned anything about further testing, other areas to test?
Yes, they talk
Okay,
about that.
so it sounds like
There's a
Lisa-
lot
It's a
that
question of
needs to go
where-
on.
And
But
for
they're
what-
but
and for what-
raising that question, so they're not just going with what's
No,
there.
no, no. They're just essentially putting together a sampling plan.
Good.
Where are we gonna sample, what are we gonna sample, and what are we gonna test for?
So
All
obviously,
those things.
between this board and the other boards and the residents, that carbonized lagoon should be on that
And-
list someplace.
And we
And they-
will,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely will be. And certainly there's a very active group, as you know,
Right.
of homeowners that live
Yeah, yeah.
nearby
Vested
who are quite
interests.
well educated on these matters.
Right.
And are gonna be a very, I think, high-energy PIP group.
Yeah, so that's obviously important, to make sure nothing falls through the cracks,
Right.
because sometimes we don't get this info.
And so Mabon also has to do an environmental risk assessment, because that was never done. That was supposed to have been done originally in 2001, so that.
And where did that came up in the Weston and Sampson as well?
Well, that came up from DEP when they did their audit back in November or whatever, that environmental risk assessment was never done of that property. So there were some administrative issues, and then there were also some technical issues that were never followed through on.
Did Weston and
And-
Sampson give a time frame for being done with their report?
No, they didn't. Not that I recall. I think the PIP is the next thing that will drive the process. You know, how that's all gonna go.
Well, that works in parallel with what this is all about.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm kind of assuming that there's gonna have to be a sampling grid and analyses done pretty soon, once the design has been
They
put
could
together.
wait for the PIP, because if you get the public information, public input, one of the things that group and other people would mention is that we got concerns of this area, so maybe they're
Yeah,
waiting on that.
but that's like
to-
on a month cycle or a month and a half, something like that.
Which
That's-
one?
The
PIP is 80 days, I
re-
think, talked
introduction.
about it
Right,
in
that
here
starts in July, right?
somewhere. Yeah.
You have a question? Actually, what y'all doing back there? Are you here to talk about something?
What you're talking about right now?
Oh, well, come on up. Rather than yelling across the room, you can have a front row
So
seat
maybe
if
you
you like.
can share some information with us.
I just have a question, is the, individual boards, I guess there was a recent letter from Babbitt, and I saw that the Board of Health was copied on it as well.
Mhm.
Is the Board of Health part of the PIP process yet, or are they going to be involved in it, or attend those type of meetings, or?
Well, the PIP will be out there for a while, won't just be one meeting, correct? I've never been involved in that process, I just read through it recently. So I believe that's an ongoing process, that when it's actually laid out in the library, you can come in and comment on it. They may have a presentation to begin with, but I believe it's an ongoing process. How many days they lay it out?
It seemed fairly short. They're gonna present some information, the public can make comments and ask questions, and
Okay.
Mhm.
should receive answers within a certain number of days, and then, I don't know what happens after that, but the town's consultant, Weston and Sampson there, it doesn't sound like it's necessarily been hired by any of these boards to represent the town in the PIP process.
Well, I think the consultant was hired by the ZBA. We can't hear you. Come on up, folks.
No, it's a good question. I
So-
mean, as far as, is Weston and
Whoa,
Sampson at all
stop,
involved?
stop. Please, come forward. And
Involved
pick up a
in-
microphone, because this is all on public access, so we need to let folks at home know what's going
Yeah,
on
well, we
here.
just to know if Weston and Sampson's involved in the PIP process or not. I can't answer that.
No, I don't know either. If the town will hire them to represent them in the PIP process, or are we left, to our own citizens to work through the material? Or do you want to sign on to the PIP process, or you're automatically involved because you're the Board of Health? That's, I believe what we want to know.
Well, we're not involved in picking the consultant.
Right.
So, and we get copies of the material, that's about it. And beyond that, the PIP process, I mean, we can go to represent the Board of Health. but, you know, we don't have a consultant on board to do that. That's from the zoning board.
Or is it from the Board of Selectmen?
Well, there is a group of individuals basically representing the ZBA, representing the, I believe, the Planning Board, the Conservation Commission, the Board of Health. There are individuals, one-offs of all of those boards together from time to time with two LSPs. One is the applicants and one is ours. And so you have this gathering of people who are trying to essentially do a reasonable analysis of what are the problems with that site and what are the impacts of those problems on surrounding residences especially, and also, you know, the public water supplies that aren't that far away downstream. So there is this gathering that takes place from time to time. It's mostly controlled, or it's
When is
called
it?
to order by the town administrator, not town administrator, although he's there sometimes. But Richard, what's Richard's title? Town planner? Town planner. So the town planner is kind of the one who organizes these meetings, and often not a lot of lead time prior to. But there was one happened just before the ZBA meeting on the 6th. I'm not sure if I haven't heard of any since then. There is one coming up around about the 25th of June, which, by the way, if somebody here wants to go.
I've never even heard of these things.
Are residents allowed to go to these meetings and listen?
So if two of us want to go to these meetings, how
Well,
does
somebody
that
should
work?
represent the board. I can't. So if somebody wants to represent the Board of Health in that
What is
meeting,
it?
I think it's the 25th of June. You can check with Richard on this, but I think there's gonna be a gathering of the person who wrote this, Frank, is that his name? The person who represented the list.
I forgot what his name was.
Anyway, Frank Riccardi.
I won't be here.
It sounded to me that, when I listened to the presentation, that they were still going to be involved, because there was a question about, well, he talked about different specialists that he brought in, and one of the zoning board members mentioned. So will your hydrological specialist be here to answer our questions? And he
Mhm.
said yes, so it sounded like they were still gonna be involved.
Well, they are. I mean, this is just the beginning of the
Right.
engagement with this group.
So then if this PIP process is going forward with documents being presented and for public comment, then they will also be
Well, these are
commenting
the
on
presenters.
it.
Yeah, I mean,
What?
these folks are the ones that are
They're
developing
not
the
doing the
information.
PIP. The PIP is being,
No.
No.
I'm saying the folks, the residents who are involved in the PIP process need to be provided information, and these are the folks generating it.
I think it's Mabit is the one that's generating the information. These folks
Well,
are
the-
reviewing
well,
it. That's
I
my
should-
understanding.
I should say it differently. These are the folks that are designing the information that we seek, deciding what it is we want in terms of filling in the data gaps and
Okay,
so on.
I agree
No,
with
the
that.
actual people in the trenches who are
right.
developing the analyses, that's that guy
That's
over
right.
there.
So that goes back to the question, is Weston and Sampson at all involved in the PIP process?
Which-
We don't know the
The
answer to
PIP is a
that.
public process. These are the techie guys that are providing
Right, but
information
they,
to the
are
public.
they still no, they're providing the information to the public, Mabits. The developer's consultant is providing that information as part of the process, the PIP process. The question is the town's consultant at all, or do they even need to be involved in that PIP process? Should they be involved, or are they involved? That's the question. I mean, was that
It's
brought up
another
at the
reviewer.
discussions that you had?
Well, I think we're missing something.
Yeah.
The actual control over what does this additional data collection scheme look like, that is a decision that is going to be made not by the consultant, not by the applicant.
No,
It's
I
gonna be made by the
completely
town.
understand that, but,
And that's where this group is gonna be.
in the PIP process, is gonna be a lot of technical data presented. And I'm sure a
Yeah.
lot of these people are gonna go there, aren't gonna understand that, and nor would even some people in the field understand that. So as the town consultant, should they be
presents?
there to oversee what's presented, what's being asked, to make sure that the
residents'
Well,
concerns are adequately
Well, the answer
addressed.
is almost obvious, of course. You have to have somebody with technical background to provide this
But
information.
do we
to
know
make it
that
understandable.
Weston and Sampson is involved with this process at all, even if it's reviewing it after
They
the
have a
fact?
scope of work. I don't
Right,
know.
we
The
don't know what
question
their
are they
proposal
involved
is.
in
Yeah,
Right, and we don't have the answer because we didn't hire them.
right. I mean, that's a good question to ask the ZBA, because they're the folks that
Exactly.
hired these
So
people.
that was a question at that ZBA meeting, and it
Yeah.
was, everyone kind of
They didn't
looked
know.
around, threw up their hands, and, you know, they probably need to be paid to be doing that.
Oh, yeah, that would, like you said, that would be in their scope of work.
Yeah, I mean, somebody's gotta be the conveyor of whatever data comes out of these studies to you all, so you can then respond with whatever comments you have as a part of the PIP process.
And potentially, Weston and Sampson wasn't aware that there was going to be a PIP process, and they may have never put that in their proposal to do. So that should be something that the, right, so that's something that the ZBA could be looking to add on to their scope of work, if necessary. Weston and Sampson can also just chime in.
It gets messy, it's not their scope, it's the selectmen's, right? They're
Well, I'm not
wired
sure,
up.
I thought zoning hired, I'm not sure exactly who their signs, I know, selectmen signed
They're
the
working
contract.
for the
but-
ZBA, now who
Right.
actually signed the contract, that's
Right,
another
so-
story, it's probably Jack Hathaway.
So that is a question as far as who could change it. So maybe the first question they should ask Weston and Sampson is, do they need to be involved in that PIP process? Is there any information in there that they should be reviewing? Or is this strictly something that's just informational to the public, and they have all the information they need by reviewing what's already out there? So,
Well, you all who are involved in the PIP process, I'm assuming, are gonna need to have information to respond to, and to come back with your own thoughts about, is this a problem or not? That has to be conveyed to you. I assume, but you can certainly check with ZBA on this, that the provider to you of the information, the best information that we've got, and the best and most recent data that we've got, is going to be Weston and Sampson. That would make the most sense to me. They're the people that are deeply engaged in all of this. This is our LSP, and that's really the person who should be presenting data, not only to you guys, but frankly to all the rest of us as well.
Can you guys request data from them, or are you gonna ask them to present to you
Well,
guys
you
their
heard, maybe you heard
opinions,
that
or-
already. We are requesting that we be in the loop. Anything that is being presented to any boards in this town needs to go to all of the land use and public health boards.
we
So
can't,
could they come in here and present to you guys as a board? Get it,
Or
hear it straight from them?
attend-
for it. We can't change the scope of work, if that's not in there,
No, not
nor
change
can
the
we.
scope of work, but
Right.
hear the same presentation that they gave to the ZBA, to give to you guys, to fill you guys in on what's going on.
I'd be happy, usually when the ZBA has it, we can go there as a board to hear it during the hearing, you know what I mean? Otherwise, we can get a hard copy, electronic copy of what the actual report is. So we can go to that meeting, obviously, to get right from the horse's mouth, so to speak. When's the next ZBA meeting? Not for a while, so I mean. July 18th, and then the PIP starts, I think, on the 23rd or something like that, correct?
We already got the letters for the PIP, and they're going to let us know when the preliminary public involvement plan will be presented. That date hasn't been conveyed to us yet.
How do we get a question answered from ZBA before that meeting? Can we go through you and just say, I'd like to know if Weston and Sampson's take on the PIP, if they should be involved or not, simply?
Why don't you email or call Rich McCarthy?
Okay,
Mhm.
good enough.
Be the best.
I mean, one of the things that Weston and Sampson said was, they want to know the vertical and horizontal extent of contamination, and that hasn't really been delineated yet, and that's why there's going to be more.
So at the ZBA hearing, they had the presentation from Weston and Sampson, and they said they need to know the vertical and horizontal extent of the contamination on the site. And that means going as far as they need to with test data, so.
I'd just like to hear from Weston and Sampson if they feel, well, their feelings on the PIP itself. Do they need to be involved or not, that's all. So I'll send an email to the town planner.
Okay.
So you spoke about a workshop on the 25th of June? Am I correct?
There is a meeting, I believe. Rich McCarthy is the person who's organizing this meeting. He was trying to find a time when various people could make a meeting. These were, I think, mostly representatives of the town boards who have been gathering from time to time to talk to the two LSPs. Tom DePlacido was there to discuss what's going to happen next in terms of mapping out this whole filling in the gap strategy.
So could there be a neighborhood representative as well? It just seems like
Well,
it
it's
should
not
be.
my meeting, but Richard McCarthy can certainly be the person who could decide.
Thank you.
And if you all want to be there, it's probably going to happen during the daytime, right? Do you know anything about this
I'm not
meeting?
gonna be around. The 25th, I won't be around. I would like to be there, but I won't be there.
Okay.
I can be there in the daytime, but not at night.
Betsy, you talked to Richard about what's happening on the 25th? Because there was an email that went around. No, I said, would you find out from Richard what's happening on the 25th? Because if there's going to be a Board of Health representative, certainly.
Does he usually contact you?
Yeah, except the last time he contacted me, I said I'm not going to be able to make it, so he probably is not going to contact me again. But he should let us know so Fran can represent the board. Because it would be good to have at least one of us
Depends
there.
on what time of the day it is. Yeah. The 25th is
Next
Monday.
Tuesday?
Monday, Tuesday.
Is Monday? And one of those days next week.
Monday. So that came up because we were talking about correspondence, and that was part of the correspondence about this public involvement plan, and also the permanent solution is being retracted because they're going to do more environmental risk assessment, so,
Yeah, they're going to start.
yes,
Environmental risk
not more.
assessment.
They're going to start, right,
Yeah, they kind of left that part out.
right. Do you folks have any other questions about?
That's a question for y'all.
Abby
Do
Bell.
you have any more questions for
About-
us?
Yeah,
Well, can you send a letter to whoever is hiring Weston and Sampson that you would like to get copies of their results, since you didn't get that report? Since they will be involved in the future, you probably want to be on the distribution.
I assume we're on the distribution for the reports. From my understanding, this is just sort of a precursor, what do you want to call it, a summary from, looks like a presentation
it was,
more
yeah,
than
it
a
was the
report.
presentation,
Yeah,
right.
so I think that's why we didn't get an electronic copy of
You
that
should get those.
thing here. This looks like more like a
These-
PowerPoint presentation.
Right, but Amy's ready to send it to you, if you request it.
Where did I get these reports? Sandy, did you send me this report? Yeah.
But I got
So
that
they're,
in
the
grade,
reports,
yeah.
it's not a report, it's a PowerPoint of what you would actually see if you went on and looked at the YouTube video. It's just the presentation
Right.
that they presented to the town at that June 6th meeting,
And
because I
that's-
was out of the country.
That's the consultants. I'm sorry, the
The
applicant's
LSPs.
consultant.
Both of them.
Right, but that one, Mabbitt's
Mabbitt and
is-
Weston
is-
both gave,
But that's the applicant's consultant.
Correct.
Mabbitt's, right,
Mavic gave a history of the
site.
site. Weston Sampson gave a little bit of a.
Microphone, please. This is for broadcast, sorry.
Weston Sampson gave a brief overview of, to the board, explaining what other testing should be involved in the
And I assume that's why we typically don't get PowerPoint presentations submitted to us. You know, if it's an actual document or some type of report, we would, but I'm not surprised we didn't get a PowerPoint.
So is there a group of citizens who are gathering as a result of the PIP process being launched to, I don't know, sort of map out your own strategy in terms of what you're looking for, in terms of assurances that whatever's going down there at the bottom of the hill is not having an impact on your wells? I mean, I know there's been concerned about this for a long time. But
Well, we're depending on Weston and Sampson to fully delineate the site.
yeah, well, right. As I said earlier, I mean, whatever contamination is out there has been out there for quite some time. And the real question, which I think has been alluded to now, is that we need to be able to confirm that whatever is out there is not impacting us, is not impacting our next-door neighbors in Franklin. There are some key issues around what do those concentrations really mean? And it's all about mobility, it's all about chemical forms of these compounds, these elements. And that's the data that I think our LSP and even the applicant's LSP have an understanding that this is what's got to be filled in if we're going to make any informed decisions about what to do next. So with that in mind, is there anything else we can enlighten you or confuse you with tonight?
We'd just like your help paying attention to some of the stuff that seems to be beyond the scope of the other boards. Because the water is within your realm.
Right. Protecting public health via
sure.
protecting water quality, that is our job. In fact, that's the reason why I believe, I certainly was the person that they looked to first because that's my background. But certainly somebody from the Board of Health has to be present if that conversation takes place. And that will continue to be the case.
Is there anything else too? They did not do the environmental study, so is there anything else that would be found possibly that you would fall in your scope?
Ask that
Well, I
question
think-
again? I'm not sure what you asked.
So they never did an environmental, I'm not sure what it's called,
Risk
environmental.
assessment.
Assessment?
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, yeah,
So-
that's kind of more of a biological, organismal kind of, this is all chemistry here,
Right.
which is great because I'm a chemist, I love that stuff. But there's another whole part of this, which is what has actually been the impact on the biological community of this area. Because that's a good indication. If there's no living organisms down there in large patches, that tells you something bad is going on. And that's the part that I think they're still missing. They don't really have a good assessment of, the flora and the fauna that are down there and what should be down there for comparison purposes. So that part they're still working on.
The fact
So are
that
the
it's-
areas that you are in charge of that would protect us as citizens is what I'm asking, I guess, besides the groundwater?
What the Board of Health is in charge of?
Yes.
Well,
Well, the fact that the 40B, does limit but typically, if this was the 40B, the only thing that they'd be held to is the state health code and not our local regulations. So as far as the presentation, everything would go to the zoning board. And we would be allowed to give some comments on it, and that's it. And we wouldn't really be involved at this level. But the fact that there's groundwater involved in potential contaminants, that's kind of our focus. That's what really drags us into this. And as part of this scope, what they do is, in this little PowerPoint, they do outline this scope of work. And one of them is evaluate the risk posed to the site by natural, environmental, to public health, including the abutters and the future residents. So that groundwater and public health issue is what we're gonna be relying on with Weston and Sampson to review. So that's what drags us in, that's what keeps us looking at this. So the groundwater really is kind of what we're focused on, and that's a public health issue. Groundwater and the potential of that soil or groundwater be breaking to the surface, contaminating other waters around there. Now, once you get into that, then you start dragging in conservation and things like that, so that drags the other boards in. But our focus on this one as a Board of Health is health concerns involving groundwater or well contamination.
and keep in mind, this was all triggered by a 40B originally, but really what we're doing is rolling the clock back 20, 30 years to something that happened a long time ago, which is the Buckley and Mann site. And what appears to be not the best way to try to, stabilize And in some cases, actually, they did truck out material that was badly contaminated. But in other places, they essentially just buried it. And there's a really big field out there, which apparently some bikers think is a good bike cycle track. And that AUL, as they call it, is sort of the legacy of the Buckley and Mann project. But unfortunately, from what I can tell, not all of the bad stuff either got trucked off-site or made its way into the AUL. There may be some out there, and the Carbonizer Lagoon is a good example of that, where not sufficient attention was paid to all the possible sources of contamination. So a piece of what's going on now is really trying to go back in time and figure out what do we need to now do to address some of these lingering issues that go back to the 1980s and 1990s, when we thought we had a handle on all the pollution problems out there. And it turned out we might have missed one or two.
Can I ask you what you meant by it was triggered by the 40B? I'm not sure if I understand what
Well,
you
I
mean.
mean, all of this seemed to come to light as the result of Tom DePlacido buying the site for the purposes of building the 40B subdivision, as well as the other development that's taking place up the hill, you know, heading toward Franklin. But the part that's down next to the river is the part that we're all now talking about. This isn't even a part of his project. I mean, he's not gonna be using that territory down there, except if it were clean, he'd probably use it for sort of passive recreational kinds of hiking trails, kinds of things. It's not gonna be a part of the residential development that he originally purchased the land to build, okay?
I don't think he's purchased it yet.
Well, oh, yeah,
But,
good point.
But I
Hasn't
think it was
mind purchased.
triggered by an audit by the DEP, which was separate. The DEP audit was just on the Buckley and Mann AUL. I don't think it had to do with the fact that it was linked to this 40B. So the retraction of the AUL was from the audit, just on the Buckley and Mann property, if I'm not
Well,
mistaken.
right, but DePlacido's involvement in all of this, I mean, he is paying for, you know, all of this. Is all about the fact that, on top of what we had already in the ground, but now we have this subdivision coming along on top of it.
Just to clarify too, he's going within 150 feet of the contamination. He's not far away from the contamination.
With his houses?
Yes.
One of the things that was brought out that I recall from listening to that zoning board meeting was that the Western Sampson, Frank from Western Sampson mentioned that there should have been monitoring of that AUL since 2001. Now, Mr. DePlacido said that's not the case, but this is what Frank said, and he can't find any records of that. So, do we have any records in this town that came to the Board of Health? I mean, we get information from MCI when they have audits. How, did anybody that you know of, that anybody ever did any type of monitoring of that AUL?
I can't answer that.
No.
I
No,
don't-
you
I
don't, it's
know
not
of any.
something that you recall.
I don't know of any.
No, and, so, it's, should have been ongoing since 2001.
Right.
I mean, DPE must, or DEP must have just realized that they never got any testing results, and that's why they went in to do this audit, I guess, I don't know. Anyway,
Well,
okay.
all right.
Well, do you want to?
That's your turn.
Question?
I will say
Oh,
this.
wait a sec, wait. You're about to ask a question, I thought.
I was, I'll, hold on a minute.
Okay. your
Can
turn.
I ask another question? So Mr. DePlacido has been investigating this land since 2014 or before. Is there any data from him for these wells? Because he's been exploring it for quite some time.
Any data from DePlacido? You mean his consultants? For
Right.
About what? I mean,
Well, you were saying there were monitoring wells that we had, which we did have as a town. So he's been exploring this land for a substantial amount of time. He had a presentation in February of 2014, so he must have been exploring it for a long time prior to that.
I don't know how long. I mean, there are, you can see, you know, monitoring wells out there that have been placed sometime in the last decade. I mean, they don't go back to the 1980s or 90s.
So shouldn't there be data from that, I guess, is what I'm,
Well, there is
According
data.
to-
There's a lot of data. This report that we saw, the big thick one, has data from
Yeah.
2018, has data from 2017.
This one was 2014, I think,
2014.
actually. 13, 14, 4 test pits.
Right. So you're right, there is some
But did
recent
we
data.
get these results? I have no idea.
Even if we
Aren't they
had
in
them
that big
right
thick
now,
report?
No, but did the Board of Health ever get these
Oh,
results? That's the question, I
they
think
could have
that
been,
you're
they
asking.
could have been done for him for exploratory reasons. If he's thinking about buying it, it doesn't necessarily mean we were given data. He could have been looking for it himself to see if there was anything there, he wanted to go forward with this or not. I've never seen anything come through with that. Whatever data is available, the most important thing now is that Weston and Sampson reviews everything that's there and comes up with the report. Because to get just a bunch of loose data isn't gonna do us anything right now. That was the whole idea we talked about the last meeting, is having Weston and Sampson as our consultant working for us, for the town, so they can actually go through this, comb through what's important, and tell us what's really going on, and we're not getting it through the eyes of the developer's consultant. So that's kind of what we're at right now. We're waiting for that. And the only thing I'll add is that this is a rare circumstance. I don't think any of us in these boards have come across this situation where you're gonna find these contaminated sites. I know I haven't, even working as an engineer, I don't come across this in development. A lot of us probably don't know the exact route we're going through here. We're kind of feeling through this along with you. And I think the important thing is you guys gotta keep coming to the meetings and keep asking the questions, because you're teaching us some of this stuff too. I'm dependent on Weston and Sampson. I know in the field you get your consultant, you pay them to work for you. I'm waiting to see what they come up with. To get just a bunch of data thrown at us means nothing. Someone who knows what the hell they're doing with this gotta tell us what's going on. So, keep going to the meetings, keep asking the questions, so this stuff doesn't fall through the cracks. He said, we're learning along with you, so.
So before you had mentioned the impact from the development. Now, the AUL is situated fairly close, like Peg
Mhm.
said,
Mhm.
to where the houses are, and also to the wastewater treatment plant, which in reports that have been presented to the ZBA, the water table under the AUL is going to be raised 4/10 of a foot. I'm not sure if it's going to change, that number will change, but my sense is that we should look at how does that impact whatever contamination is under the AUL, if raising the water table under the AUL is going to cause more problems. And that could be something that the Board of Health actually has an interest in, as the wastewater treatment plant and how that will impact the AUL. If it remains an AUL, that's not even, certain yet.
The data you're talking about, this increase in groundwater elevation as the result of there actually simply physically being this wastewater treatment plant there. I'm wondering if it also has some impact on the fact that a lot of soil is coming off the hill, which means that the ground is going to be absorbing, less ground is going to be absorbing precipitation. And that also could have an impact on groundwater levels downstream a little bit there. Yeah.
So maybe that's part of your interest, is what happens to that water.
Was that part of a mounding?
It would possibly, it would probably be part of a mounting calculation from the large point discharge. And it does have a way of rippling as the water's being discharged into the ground. It meets groundwater and kind of raises it up a little bit. And that could affect the AUL if it's close enough. So that all has to be designed and calculated out if it does have effect to it or not. And there are AULs all over Massachusetts. I mean, they do cap landfills and make passive use over it. Earlier, when we were talking about the boards of health concern, but not only groundwater, but also activities above the AUL, wherever it becomes determined and how large site it becomes, and you're going to find more stuff, because 20 years ago, the laboratories weren't as technical as they are now. And then the end results would be a real interest to the Board of Health, is what are they going to do? What's the conclusion? Are they going to cap it? Are they going to burn it? Are they going to excavate it? Or are they going to filter it? What are they going to do? How are they going to deal with it? Or are they just going to leave it alone and cap it? So that would be a main interest. And then what's going to happen to the land? It's going to just be left alone, like designated as AUL. And hopefully, the specs from this company may go out to the neighboring wells and maybe do some tests. If the pollution's going low, in the ground, testing the low wells. If it's raising high, test the high wells. Be really thorough about it. But again, I'm not sure what the specs are.
Well, certainly with the hoped for, I think, outcome of all of this analysis is that we'll find, yeah, there are some hot spots in various locations around that site. But if whatever that material is simply parked there, and there's been no disequilibrium, which is now mobilizing it and letting it get into the ground, further into the ground, then essentially what you're talking about is no extensive alteration of any kind, because anything you try to do to make it better may very well make it worse. So and that's kind of the logic they used with that original treatment of the Carbonizer Lagoon. They didn't really think they had a problem. Or maybe one data point seemed to think that made it seem like they had a problem, but then they had 2 or 3 other data points that looked pretty good, so they took an average and said, that's not so bad. And the result was, nothing was done. And so that lagoon just sits there in pretty much its state when it was left years ago.
Mr. Chairman, also, if the consultant's good, they probably give a couple of options. A, B, and C with timeframes of either eliminating the pollution and the cost factor of each one. It can go, you can apply zero pollution by having this quadruplet, cost of taking all the stuff out, and it could do it in 3 months. It'd be like $65 million, which wouldn't be sensible. Or they could probably say we could cap it and then leave it there for 30, 40 years. They should have different options on the table so the town could take it, or the private landowner could take it, or the state can decide. So it's really early in the stage,
But it's not a capped landfill. It's an activity and use limitation, which was supposed to be audited within 5 years that the RAO came out, and it never was audited. So it's not a capped landfill. It is an AUL, which has different regulations.
I think back in those days, things weren't capped. Capped came after the fact. And just to cap it, just so the rainfall and snow melt just won't trickle through the ground and carry the pollutions into the groundwater.
It's a permeable. It's just a separation layer. It's not really capped for groundwater to not seep through there. It's seeping through there. If you look at the regulations and the specifications of what was put on that site, I mean, it's so long ago, and you probably can't do it like that nowadays, but that there is no liner underneath there, and the cap is permeable. So I personally think we have to bring it up to date and take a look at what we can do.
Well, certainly when you folks have your meeting with the LSP, now maybe, I'm kind of impressed with Frank. I think this guy is on top of things. And so there's a good chance he's gonna recognize right away that what you're just now talking about could be a problem, and that we need to think about anyway, an alteration to that big piece of land out there to make it less permeable and therefore less likely to be contaminating what's ever down beneath it. So,
I think some of these,
bring it up.
and I think some of
There's
these,
one, you have the report right there from Mabit.
Yes.
Do you, Fran?
With this one here, the
Blue one, right.
PowerPoint?
Right. So they gave a little presentation. It was very hard to see because the sun was streaming in, and
That's why I printed
Yeah.
this, because
So
even
on
though I
the-
was watching it, I couldn't.
right. So if
see
you
it
watch
on
the
the
video,
computer.
you should actually get the printout first. So as residents, we couldn't really see what the max levels were, but you can see them on there now. And the max levels for like chromium-6 is now 79, and you know the limit is 100. That's not the same number that was printed on table 13 that we showed you at the last meeting. So there is some other data that we don't know where, and I'd like to get somebody to make sure that they test at that location, which is unspecified so far, as
Is
I know.
that location near the lagoon we're talking
I wish I knew,
about?
for sure.
All right.
I suspect it's right near the Mill River and the lagoon.
one thing I will say is,
So much
during regular business hours, we do have the town planner
Review.
now that you can talk to, that you don't have to wait for these board hearings. And he may have more information on what the scope of work of these folks is at Western and
Yes.
Sampson.
I'll tell you.
We really did not get involved in that scope of work for whatever reasons we talked about before at the last meeting. So we didn't exactly sure what they're doing out there. We're relying on what they're, when I read this scope of work, they're looking at the public health issues, the well issues, the groundwater. So I see that's what they're supposed to be doing. If there's any specific questions you have on those things, you might want to direct it to the planner. Might be able to get quicker answers instead of waiting for every board hearing, you know? Right.
Specifications now for MCP, especially with the sensitive environmental receptors in that area, you probably can't just leave things there anymore. I suspect that.
Right, so I mean, that's what I'm saying, if you have specific questions that maybe Western and Sampson, who again is around 9 to 5 as well, maybe they can just get a quick answer from them, you know, on some of these things as opposed to coming to us, filtering it through someone. Not to say you shouldn't come here, I'm just saying you might have to wait longer when you're going through boards that don't meet every 6 weeks, you know?
Well, thank you.
All right, well, thank you all. Do you have a final?
I've got one more.
Yep.
What, on the overall larger project, what is the board's involvement on site? You do
With the
some-
40B itself?
Yeah, the whole larger project. What are you looking for on site when there's excavation, or, I guess, what's the involvement of the board day to day? Or is there any?
Non-existent.
It's limited to really the septic system before soil testing beforehand. If this was just a 40B project without the environmental issues, we'd have our agent out there doing the soil evaluation, testing and witnessing what goes on for areas they're gonna put the septic system in. Also, results of well drilling that they may be doing for public water or something like that, they'd be looking at well results, making sure areas are situated with setback distances correctly with the proposed plan they come in. Reviewing the septic system plan when it's presented to make sure it meets Title V and our local regulations. And then he'd actually inspect as they construct. He'd be like 3 different inspections, I think, where they inspect the excavation itself, make sure everything's where it's supposed to be as far as groundwater and soils, and then inspect the system when it goes in, and then the final grading and things like that. So he would be involved, we would be involved, but not to this extent. We have regulations in place for that. A lot of the times, he can handle this without us even being involved. So,
But I think
Most
we
of the
can,
time.
we're concerned about dust. You know, there's gonna be a lot of digging going on.
well, that's
and-
part of, that's the NIPD's permit, that's a construction permit, that's not
Well,
us.
No, it is our concern, you know, I mean, that's a health risk. It all depends on how much dust they're gonna raise. What are they going to do when they're digging up, you know?
You're talking about this site now, when they do it?
Yes, this site.
There will be
No,
a
I'm
con-
talking about the construction of the.
There will be a NIPD's construction permit that addresses dust in that regard, because it's the
And
size of the
noise,
site.
and noise pollution, noise
Noise
and
pollution,
dust
we have
comes
ordinances
under
in
our
town that, we
preview.
have ordinances in town that cover noise issues, when they can start and how much it is and things like that. So yes, if it gets to a certain level where it's a hearing issue, those putting off things, we could get involved. But there are already ordinances in place as far as that goes.
Well, we can just, when there are comments for the 40B, and I'm not sure whether that period is over already for the,
Well, the comments for the 40B started, when it first started about a year ago.
Yes.
And I was commenting to them, maybe
Yes.
once or twice, but then when they switched from an on-site septic system to a wastewater treatment plant, then it went to a state level, and so the local board was no longer involved.
so you didn't comment at all about dust pollution or?
No, actually,
thought
I
I
think
had-
I gave you.
you did.
I gave you a copy. It was a very general, but I was concerned about a lot of different areas, and one was the AUL, and also I had a list of things that we'd be looking into in the future, but we were taken out of the review process because we were going to a different type of wastewater treatment facility.
I thought I had seen that on it. Go ahead, Sandy.
So can the Board of Health, I believe there's still time because the public hearing is still ongoing. So there were other issues other than just what you're referring to, Wade. That the residents would like the Board of Health to weigh in and ask for a health and safety plan to be developed so that the dust it's going to be for 7 years. His excavation is 5 phases, 7 years. So that creates a nuisance in the neighborhood. And the noise level is going to be a nuisance to the people living right there. I mean, it's not a small project. This is like putting an excavation site in an R3 zone, and that's definitely something that we're concerned with and don't feel it even belongs in that part of town. as far as an excavation goes. The 40B is, if it's reasonable, you know, we would say it's okay, but to have residents have to live in an excavation with trucking every day for 5 days a week and workers 6 days a week for 7 years does create a nuisance. And as for the Board of Health, can you ask for a health and safety plan to be developed and submitted to you for comment?
Health and safety plan.
Almost like an OSHA plan, in a sense. But the dust control is done by large trailers with what they call water buffaloes. In the back of them, they have like a pipe with holes in it, and they would run this water buffalo up and down the road and wet down the roads, and that keeps the dust down.
I mean, it should be part of the
When
plan
he's
she's talking
removing a
about.
million cubic yards of earth,
But
you
that
know,
would be
you
part of-
can't wet that down.
That's part of any construction, water buffaloes. It's a very common thing to have when you have dirt roads. The excavation aspect, I think you have to wait till it starts happening to see what's going on. other
No,
than-
we
I mean, could-
want you to specify certain things.
Well, I tell you what, I've been on the board since 1981, and I don't recall at any time ever issuing the kind of advisory that you're talking about. I'm not sure where else in the town, things like dust control and
Well,
noise control, that's selectmen, I believe.
It's NIPD's, you have to have dust control for your.
What do you
who
mean? I
enforces
don't know
it?
what that word is. What
National
is?
Pollutant Discharge and Elimination System. It's part of any construction site that's bigger than an acre. You have to show that you have erosion and dust control products in place and how it's controlled, and it's part of the submittal. You also have the earth removal bylaw in town. I'm not sure that addresses it, but it might address some of those issues as
I
well.
think it does, but
Right.
those are selectmen issues, right?
They ask for a waiver from that. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things, but they can't get the NIPD's one's a state thing, so that's part of the 40B anyway. And they have to submit what's called a notice of intent for that too, where they actually submit a plan that this is how we're going to do the work. This is how we're going to make sure dust doesn't happen, how we make sure we're not gonna track sediment onto the roadways, how we make sure we're not gonna have, it's erosion and sediment, it's not noise. But it does include dust, because dust is part of an erosion, it's an airborne erosion. So that has to be addressed in their plan, that's submitted to the state, so.
So we should see that in the plan if we went back and looked on the plan?
It's a construction period one, so once they have approval, they could actually do it prior to construction, but they would have to submit it, so they don't have to put it in beforehand.
Who would enforce that? Would it be the
EPA,
EPA?
yeah.
Okay.
It's a-
EPA?
Yeah,
Or
it's a federal,
Oh, EPA.
EPA, yeah.
Where are we gonna find?
Good luck with that.
Well, you know, if you disturb over an acre, you have to apply for it, and it's an EPA permit, and you can make calls all you want. If you have an issue, you can call them up, and you have a notice of permit number, and you can say, we're having issues with it. I've never tried it, so I don't know how responsive they are, but that's who covers it.
Okay.
Thank you. It's interesting.
Is it possible to get a dust monitoring system? I mean, you just mentioned that you
would
haven't,
be, and that would be a specific question you'd ask zoning, that they could put in their, you know, part of their,
that's zoning.
to
So-
get those specifics to them, yeah, that would be through them. They could say, well, part of this, we'd like to have this, this, and this.
I did hear you say that you haven't addressed anything like this. But when have you addressed 100 million, a million cubic yards of material removed?
This is a big one.
When have you addressed 200 units?
What was, remember what Town Hill was?
Where Town Hill was?
I mean, that was a lot of, I mean, before my time, but that must have been a lot of.
I mean, there have been some big projects with a lot of gravel removal. I don't know of any that come to mind that are as big as the one that Tom is doing up there.
I think in the state, it's probably bigger than anything anywhere.
Yeah. But in any case, what you're hearing from Jeff is that there are some other agencies that are involved in all this. Traditionally, the Board of Health, except for the public nuisance argument, does not get involved in things like dust control that's normally handled by, well, when it comes to earth removal, it was a selectman regulated. It's planning
There's a
board now?
permit? And
Okay.
they're asking for a waiver from that?
You can see the whole list of waivers on the website. There's a waiver from just about everything.
Yeah, local, yeah, for the 40B.
Well, the reason the Board of Health is not involved in the septic design is because that's all been moved out. That's now in DEP land.
Now, is all the land gonna be moved off-site or just moved around on-site?
Off-site.
it's a pretty good gravel removal operation.
That's a gravel pit.
Yeah.
It looks like it was a gravel pit at one time, too.
But that was LaBruso's property, which
Yeah.
is not zoned residential. And
This
that
is
was
a
also many
residential
years
zone.
ago.
Yeah.
Many years
Yep.
with a lot of public.
Well, I tell you what, we're probably reaching the end of a productive time here. We need to obviously stay in touch because the PIP operation is going to be kicking in the month of July, is my understanding. And you're going to be getting a presentation at some point toward the end of July.
We have no dates.
Okay, even a ballpark, do you have a feeling?
I think they have to do something within 90 days.
I thought it was more than, or shorter than that.
The 20 days was to notify us, and they did notify us within 20 days. But I could be wrong. I'll look at it again.
All right.
20 days to respond to the petitioners, 80 days to prepare a public involvement
Public plan.
plan and hold public meetings. Public notice published at least 14 days to the prior to the public meeting, and a 20-day public comment period for PIP and all other MCP documents. So I'm guessing, once they've established a PIP, it just means every time they do any testing, then that information gets put at the library, but it doesn't mean, then you have to go and look at it. Isn't that correct?
Or, I think the petitioners also get it firsthand.
Okay. So you don't have to go to the library.
We can add anybody to the PIP at any time, if anybody from the board wants to be on the PIP.
Well, we certainly should at least get the information.
Well,
Can we get the information? I mean, is that what you're saying?
Unless you're on distribution anyways, because you're the Board of Health.
You have to use the microphone.
oops, yeah, don't forget the phone.
Yeah, I don't know. You can ask Rich
Well,
McCarthy, I guess.
Okay, I'll ask Rich.
All right, we have a couple more things to talk about here tonight, folks. Unless you have other burning questions, we can do this again sometime.
Do
Thank
you want us to ask the town planner as far as Western and Sampson's involvement in the PIP, or do you want to take care of yourself? Okay, make sure. I'll still do that tomorrow.
All right, good evening.
Okay, thank you. So, the last thing, because I don't understand this either. This was part of the correspondence, so this came, it says, in accordance with the Massachusetts Contingency Plan, again, on behalf of Sovereign Consulting, Inc., has submitted a post-temporary solution status report to the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection for, what is this site? Caritas Southward Hospital, 111 Dedham Street. So something must be going on there, and that's going to be a big development as well. So I don't know what that all means. Do you know anything about that development?
No, well, there was a development at one time for an
That's
aging
ongoing
community,
21
but
East
it was,
Side.
but they left town.
So
It
I-
has been ongoing.
Yeah, I heard through grapevines that Bob Kraft is looking to develop the property, and it will be assisted living, independent living,
Just like that consent guy from New Jersey.
independent homes, I mean, single homes,
There was,
but
there
I
was a-
don't know, I'm not quite
There
sure.
was a
Call it?
project about a year ago, but I think also it needed town vote for a zoning change. But the applicant didn't seem to be very forthcoming, so I think it
Yeah,
just.
well,
What is
eventually it
that?
never even got to the town meeting.
Did you call Mass DEP, ask him about the document?
No,
Yeah.
is that the next, so you folks
Yeah,
don't
said,
know,
please
you're
call-
not,
No, I never.
you don't know what it's all about.
Well,
So-
this I think is an open file when it comes to DEP, because that's been a problem.
They do have a 21E on the site.
Right.
Medical
This-
waste. It's a
Medical
you know, a disposal area. It was medical waste, I believe.
Yeah, and there's also oil contamination too, that,
All right, so there was a couple of
yeah,
spots.
the
that
heating
had-
oil leak. I
Yeah.
mean, there's some serious, pollution issues there that have been sitting in the ground for quite a long time.
And that's why no one would
In
buy that
fact, which is
site.
why, they would love to sell that
Mhm.
and have somebody come in and clean the mess up. I think that's referring to the ongoing mess.
Okay, I'll find out.
Call and find out, yeah.
Okay. I thought I would ask you guys first. So that's all I had under correspondence.
Okay, what about MRC? Anything on that?
MRC, so Detective Canadanian has accepted the job of developing an emergency dispensing site plan, and he'll bring it back to the group, and we'll see where we're gonna go from there. We had badges made as well, or we're in the process of doing that, ID badges, and also we went to the senior center and got, I'm not quite sure whether this was the last meeting or this, that I told you, that we did go to the senior center and helped folks sign up with the Blackboard Connect, their cell phones, as well as their landline phones are already hooked up, but you have the option of also signing up your cell phones. So we did that, and that's pretty much where we're at these days.
Okay, is
Okay.
the group still holding together, or are you taking
Yeah.
in new recruits, or?
Yeah, people come,
Come and go.
show up, and, well, I don't know if they go, they're still on the distribution list, but,
Okay.
yeah.
Unanticipated new business, this is a new category.
For 200, please.
Is there any? Guess not. Next meeting,
I would like to go back to Norway Farms Open Space Subdivision. I would recommend, prior to you signing the document, that they submit a final subdivision plan, the one that we saw there with a professional stamp on it. And also showing bounds, where it's being bounded, the open space one. Because Rick wasn't here tonight, and I thought he might be bringing it in with a professional stamp on it. That plan that you showed there wasn't.
Wasn't stamped?
It wasn't stamped, and you should have that, and also recorded before you sign it.
Before you sign the easement, why?
I don't know, I just like, it just would complete the application. Just having that plan recognized or certified by,
So are they gonna have to wait another month?
oh, I don't know, Rick could probably have it in his office, could be on his desk right now.
Yeah, it should be stamped.
why don't we sign this thing, but don't give it to anybody until you get the,
At least you can sign
Okay.
the signature.
All right,
So
well,
I'm not sure we're
it's-
gonna
it's-
begin
it's
back
your-
together
it's your
again.
choice. I just wanted to recognize that
No,
plan
right.
up there wasn't stamped.
okay,
Yeah.
all right, so with that in mind, let's
You should have.
do a conditional approval and wait for the stamp to come in. We're talking about meetings next. Anything on the horizon that's gonna require attention? This is just one copy of this we gotta sign?
Just one.
Okay. So do we want to set a date sometime at the end of July? It's just a placeholder?
Oh, at the end of July? I don't think this is June. So I'm gone on the,
Or early August, if that's a bad time.
August
Wednesday, Tuesday,
is an MRC meeting.
say August 7th, if something comes up, we can try to make it earlier if we have to.
We have an MRC meeting already scheduled for the 7th. What is today?
Only that week too, so
Okay.
shoot for August
14th?
14th, August 14th. I mean, there are a lot of town meetings to go to in the meantime. Which, can you can you just clarify that for me? If more than one of us decide to go to a zoning board meeting, we have to let you know and you'll call it a meeting?
Yeah, we have to post
Has
it.
to be posted.
Okay.
To the open meeting law, 48 hours in advance.
48.
Quorum.
So I can't just decide on that day that I want to go to the zoning board meeting and someone else
Well, no, you-
decide?
Go by
Well,
You're
yourself.
probably pretty safe.
Yeah, just check with us through email, if anyone else going. If no one
Yeah.
else is going, I'm sure one of us would back out and be like, no, we can't, just so we're
Yeah.
not gonna have a quorum there.
You're on your own.
That's all. Just go through us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
And if we wanna go, then yeah, we have the 48 hours notice with two of us there,
Okay,
If you do happen to be there, you can't talk about anything.
okay.
All right, so the second Tuesday in August, it sounds like.
August 14th?
Okay.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor? Aye.
Would you like, you can make copies of this. Do you want this one
I
too?
don't, honestly, I don't. I wanna see what our consultants come up with. That's the history of it, is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
this is actually
Well,
really good.
That might be a little bit interesting, but I
This
just don't know.
got
what we're
pretty
gonna do.
pictures in it.